Hello friends! We're counting down to the holidays with 12 days of Christmas drawings. The goal of this mini-series is to kickstart a daily habit of painting in Procreate in a fun, low-pressure way. So I invite you to grab your pencil, get comfy, and draw along with me. Today we're going to paint this merry mailbox. Let's first create a new canvas, and I have mine set to 4,250 pixels wide by 3,200 pixels tall at 300 dpi. These are essentially the dimensions of the iPad, so the canvas should fit your screen. If you don't have enough storage on your iPad for a file this large, you can use the pre-formatted screen size canvas, which will give you the same aspect ratio, but at a smaller size and lower resolution. Here's a look at my sketching process. As simple as this drawing is, it took me a few tries to figure it out, but it all came together in the end. As always, I used the 6B pencil brush for the sketch, and feel free to draw this in your own style, or you can skip the sketching process altogether because I created a template for you, which you can use as a guide for the painting. There's a link in the description for the free download. And I just want to mention, with the downloads, you'll also receive a color palette, which you can import directly into Procreate. The palette includes the base colors that I'll be using, but you'll often see me incorporate other colors as well. Feel free to add to or adjust the base palette as you see fit. All right, I'm going to use a template instead of my sketch, so let's import that. Go to the Actions menu, tap Add, tap Insert a Photo, and if you already downloaded and saved the template, find it in your camera roll and tap to import. Go to the template layer, tap the N and change the blending mode to multiply. Then reduce the opacity so the template is transparent. Now let's choose our brush. Open up the brush library, go to the pens set, and today we're going to use Inveresque. All right, the first thing we're going to do is change the background color. So tap on the background layer and change the color to the mint green from the palette. Create a new layer and drag it below the template. As a reminder, all of our painting layers are going to be below the template layer. Now switch to the red from the palette and let's ink the mailbox. Set the brush size to about 12% and outline the entire mailbox shape. Even though some parts of the mailbox are hidden behind the leaves, we're going to continue the lines so that we create a complete shape. Make sure the shape is completely enclosed so you can drag the swatch into the shape to drop fill. Turn off the template for a second so you can see this clearly. This brush is slightly textured, so the fill is inconsistent around the edges. So you'll need to go ahead and clean up those areas around the outline. Create a new layer, make it a clipping mask, and switch to the deep red. Now we can ink the side of the mailbox. Drop the brush size down to about 10%, then ink the details and lettering. I'm going for a fairly loose style here, so I'm not going to fuss too much about the lines being perfect or the lettering being super crisp. Also, at a small size, this brush takes on the qualities of a dry pen, so it's actually not ideal for really crisp lines anyway. So at this point, we've inked the design on the front of the mailbox, as well as this triangle and horizontal line on the mail slot. When you're done with that, tap on the mailbox base layer and create a new layer right above it. Since this new layer is below an existing clipping mask, it automatically becomes a clipping mask as well. Make a lighter version of the red and paint the top of the mail slot. Now switch to the deep red from the palette and make a darker version of that color. Go ahead and paint the little triangles that make the opening of the mail slot. Okay, now we're going to go to the top of all the mailbox layers, create a new layer, Now switch back to the light red we made a moment ago by tapping and holding that color. We're going to use this lighter color to add a few highlights here and there. We can also paint the design on the side of the mailbox in this lighter color as well. This little berry cluster needs some detail, so switch to the deep red and add a couple lines to separate those berries and maybe a couple lines on the leaf. Now let's paint the letter. Create a new layer at the top of all the painting layers. Remember, keep it below the template layer. Choose white. Then outline the envelope. And make sure the shape is fully enclosed. Then you can drag the swatch to drop fill. Remember to turn off the template so you can clean up those edges. Reduce the opacity on that layer. Switch to the eraser tool and make sure it's also set to Inveresk. And erase the parts of the letter that should be hidden by the mail slot. Don't forget to turn the opacity back up on that layer and turn the template back on. Let's switch brushes to add the writing on the envelope. Go back to the pens set in the brush library, and let's choose Kestrel. This brush has a finer point, so it's better for small details. Switch to the spruce green from the palette and add the lettering on the envelope. I have the brush set to 50% for this. As you can see, my lettering extends past the envelope shape. Now to avoid that, you could turn on Alpha Lock on this layer before you start writing to keep everything within the shape. But since I didn't do that, I'm just going to erase that part. Now increase the brush size to 100% to add the airmail design along the edges of the envelope. Do they still make airmail envelopes these days? I can't remember the last time I saw one. By the way, feel free to personalize your envelope however you see fit. Now you can select all the mailbox layers and that layer with the letter and group them. Switch back to the Inveresk brush. Create a new layer and switch to the light green from the palette. Let's ink the large leaves. This brush is interesting because it starts out with a really rough, dry texture, but with just a few strokes, you'll get very solid, flat coverage. I wasn't sure if I liked that initially, but once you know how this brush behaves and what to expect, it's easier to work with. Now make a darker version of that green and ink the lines on the leaves. Now turn off the template for a moment, then turn on Alpha Lock on that leaf layer. Then you can add a line along the edge of each leaf in that darker color, similar to what we did in the wreath tutorial. Turn the template back on, and don't forget to turn off Alpha Lock on that leaf layer. Now create a new layer, choose the holly green from the palette, and ink the berry stems and pine needles. Change the color to red, then you can ink the berries. Now I'm doing this on the same layer as the stems, but if you want to give yourself more flexibility to make changes later, you can put the berries on a different layer. That's what I would normally do if I were creating an illustration for work, but this painting is just for fun, so I'm honestly being a little lazy about it. Now you can switch to the deep red and add a little shading to each berry. If you want to keep your layers organized, you can select all the leaf layers and group them. Finally, let's add the snow. Create a new layer, choose white, and first we'll add a couple mounds of snow at the base of the mailbox. Now you want to make sure to cover the legs slightly so it looks like they're buried in the snow. Then you can drop the brush size down to add the snowflakes. As usual, you want these to be different sizes and slightly irregular shapes. You don't want to make perfect circles. All right, that was pretty simple. There we have our merry little mailbox. I hope you had fun with this process, and I hope you'll join me for all 12 days of this holiday painting practice. There's a link in the description for where you can download the free drawing templates and get a peek at all the drawings we'll be creating for the next 12 days. I've also added a link to the 12 Days of Christmas Drawings playlist so you can easily find all the content in this series. If you enjoyed this video, I'd love if you'd give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.